Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. As mentioned, my name is Matt Baysinger. I'm the CEO of Swellspark, and we like to get people together to have fun. How many of you guys like to have fun? Everyone's still listening. Thank you so much. Well, hey, before I get too much into it, I wanted to just share a little bit of context of where I come from. I'm going to talk to you guys today about being a neighbor. That's my daughter in the back. Hi, Cora. So real quick, this is my dad, and that's his mustache, and it's amazing. And if you guys could just give a hand to his mustache, I think is important. This is my brother, Eric. This is my family. I was probably 3 or 4 in this picture, and I grew up in a town called Louisville, Colorado, right outside of Boulder. When I was about 16 years old, we moved east to the wheat fields of Kansas. This is me as a senior in high school. Can still do the pose, trying to look really cool. But I had the opportunity to go to the University of Kansas where I ran track. Now this photo right next to me is Daryl Williamson. And Daryl was an Olympic gold medalist in the Athens Olympics. He is really, really fast, 8-time All-American, 8-time national champion. And as you see, I'm beating him. Now, this picture was taken about 200 meters into a 400-meter race. So I'm not going to say what happened the rest of the 200 meters. I just want you guys to remember this photo. Got it? All right, that's Daryl. At KU, I met my wife, Emily. We take Halloween very seriously. This is us dressed up in 2006 as Rock Band. We got engaged. Did we get engaged? We did. We got engaged in 2007. We got married in 2008. And then we started a family over the last 10 years. Can we all say, ah? Ah. Now she's really embarrassed with the kid in the back there. We started our family, and over the course of starting our family and of being married, we also have had the opportunity to start about 20 different customer-facing businesses, a lot of them here in Kansas City, but all over the world. I'm actually on a flight to Honolulu tonight to oversee a new grand opening at one of our locations. And so, as mentioned, I am a big fan of shared experiences. Now, to get into some research, at Harvard, they've done some studies, and they say that the best thing that you can do for young people, for the kids, for the future generations, is to put them in a family, to have a family. But more specifically, the best thing that you can do for young people, aside from having a family, is to have shared meals as a family. And some additional research at Brigham Young University also shows that when you enjoy life with other people, when you do things with other folks, you enjoy life more. And whether you are having a good experience, being with other people makes it a better experience. And if you're having a bad experience, being with other people makes it an okay experience. And so I am just a huge, huge proponent of shared experiences across the board. Now, we could take this conversation a couple different ways, but what I want to focus with today, what I want to talk to you about today, is how we can be realistic about the shared experiences in the life that we live with our neighbors. Now, I'm aware that you can't go to Blade and Timber or Breakout KC every night of the week, and if you can, please do. I would appreciate that. And we can't go to Disney World every weekend, and I get that, but what can we do to be maybe a little bit more like Mr. Rogers? What can we do to have great experiences with the folks who live next door? Now, a quick story. So we moved into a new neighborhood about a year ago, and we have phenomenal neighbors. We love them to death, but it was probably a couple months into moving into this new neighborhood that the thing, it happens on every 50s and 60s TV show, is I was making brownies, because it's the only thing I know how to make, and I realized about halfway through, because I'm bad at planning, that we didn't have any eggs. And so I live in an area of town where we have literally 9 grocery stores within 3 miles of my house. So I was like, hey, this is no big deal at all. I'm gonna get in the car. I start to back out. I'm gonna go get some eggs. I'll be back in 10 minutes, and I'll be eating wonderful chocolatey goodness in no time. And I back out, and I'm looking in my rearview mirror, and I see my neighbor's house. And I'm like, I could ask them to borrow some eggs. It's a possibility. Or I could go to the grocery store. And I start thinking through this. I'm like, well, if I ask them for eggs, they might ask me for something later. What if they ask me for my lawnmower? And then what if my lawnmower lights on fire and I have no lawnmower, right? Or what if they are secretly judging me? What if they're like, Matt can't even afford eggs. And then they're gonna be worried, right, that my lawn is gonna be overgrown and that my house is gonna be foreclosed. And I start just really doomsdaying this whole scenario. And by the end of it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't afford eggs. And like all my millennial friends, I have to move back in with my parents. But I took a breath and I was like, this is absurd. And I put my car in park and I walked across the street and I asked my neighbors for eggs. So I knock on the door. Katie answers. She says, hey, man, what's up? I say, do you have any eggs? She says, yeah. And she gives me eggs and I go back to my house and I make brownies. Now, since that point in time, and not necessarily because of that point in time, but since that point in time, my relationship with my neighbors has grown tremendously. We've realized that both Katie and I love knockoff LaCroix. And so anytime that we find like a new sparkling water, I bring home a couple extra for her, and she does the same for me. And we've been able to get hand-me-down clothes from our neighbors. And they introduced me, their mom actually has sewn some pants for me that I ripped. And I've been able to set up her computer and help her with booking travel. And our neighborhood has just become this really special, wonderful place. And I'm trying to think of why that is. I skipped the egg slide. I'm so sorry. The egg slide. I'm trying to think of why that is. And before I get there, before I start to go into really this idea of the ask is, I've come to realize that I really, growing up, I didn't like birthdays very much. And even more recently, I didn't like birthdays. And part of that is because I'm not thoughtful enough to be a great gift giver. And part of it is because I really feel awkward opening gifts in front of other people. Like, what if I don't smile big enough if they get me something really cool, right? And I think what I've come to find as an adult, now that I have children, is I love giving them gifts. Like, I love when I travel bringing something really cool. And I think pretty much across the board, we all love to give gifts better than we love to receive gifts. So with that as context, I do have just a couple quick questions. First, how many of you guys have the phone numbers of 8 people in your neighborhood or your apartment complex in your phone right now? Okay. What about like 4? Okay. How many of you have at least 2 phone numbers? Okay, how many of you guys have a neighbor? Okay, okay, so everyone got to put their hand up at least once. There's something really special about the idea of asking for help. Our neighbors to the north, right? We kind of knock our neighbors to the north and in jest as we say, like, they're all so nice. Like the national word of Canada is, I'm sorry. Like, it's just what it is. But I would argue that one of the reasons that we don't have great relationships with our neighbors is simply because we are unwilling to ask for help. We don't want to inconvenience people to ask them to help us. We don't want to necessarily give a gift to them either, because we don't want them to feel like they might have to give something back. That's a weird dynamic too, when you just give them the fruitcake at Christmas and they're like, now we have to give them something for Christmas next year. Like, it creates a strange thing. But I think there's something really special about asking for help from people that we are in community with. Now, I want to talk about an important caveat before we move forward as well, is I've said from the get-go, this whole idea is that by asking for help, you are getting people to, in essence, like you more. You're getting people to invest in you. But there is this situation. We've all been maybe to the Country Club Plaza. We've been to downtown Mass Street in Lawrence. And we have people and they ask us for help, right? They ask us for $1. And I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination that we shouldn't help those people. But the difference in the ask is that when people ask us for help, and we know for certain that what we give them is going to help them, it allows us to actually step into their lives a little bit more. They're asking us to play a role in what they do. So this guy right here, Benjamin Franklin, in his autobiography, he tells this story about when he was running for clerk for his second term, is he knew of a gentleman who didn't like him at all. He was in opposition to Ben Franklin. And in order to win this guy over, he wrote to him and he said, hey, I just realized that we both love this particular author, and it's come to my attention that you have this book. Would you let me borrow it? And again, this guy did not like Benjamin Franklin. But the guy sends the book, and Benjamin Franklin, I guess, reads the book, maybe glances at it, is just excited to see it, and sends it back with a thank you note. And the next time that these two folks meet in person, they met in person for the first time finally, and Benjamin Franklin writes about how they had a conversation. They had this shared thing in common that they could all of a sudden talk about. And even though they had so many things different from each other, they had something that now was the same. And so they started talking about this author, and then they realized they had more in common, and they started talking about that. And in his autobiography, Benjamin Franklin writes about how this gentleman became one of his best friends. And we have to assume that that friendship hopefully lasted until their death. So I'm not saying that me asking my neighbors for help was the thing that made them good people. I'm not saying that that was the thing that made them like us, but I am saying that by asking for help, we did 3 different things. And this is what we do when we ask people for help that we are already in community with. First, we're giving them authority over our lives. We are telling them, hey, you have something that you do or that you possess that is better than what I have. And I recognize that. And that's kind of a humbling position to be in. That's a hard place to be in. Second, it's vulnerable, right? The reason I showed you a picture of me in spandex and leather pants is I wanted to get a little bit vulnerable. But we are vulnerable with our neighbors when we recognize the fact that they have something and that by giving that thing to us, 1, they're losing something potentially, but 2, we're again recognizing that their interaction with our life is going to make our life better. And then 3rd, we are giving them the opportunity to give us a really incredible gift. And everyone loves to give good gifts. So, Yoda. There's an author named Donald Miller who I love dearly, and he has written a handful of books, and most recently he has written some books about guiding businesses into telling a better story. Jen just talked about better stories. And with this, he says that everyone wants to be the hero in their own journey. And in order to be a hero, though, we have to recognize that there are guides that allow us to be the hero. So Luke Skywalker can be the hero, but he's the hero because he had a guide that kind of showed him the way to do things. We see this with Rocky in the Creed movies. We see this with Robin Williams' character, the doctor in Good Will Hunting. We see these guides time and time again. And what we sometimes fail to recognize is really those guys are the heroes. The guides are the heroes that allow us to be the heroes in our own journey. When we ask our neighbors for help, you are opening up the door for great relationship, but you're also positioning them as a guide in your story that is going to allow you guys to have a flourishing and wonderful relationship. Now, as we move forward with this idea, it's a strange thing. It's a strange thing to ask for help. And I've heard it said before that friends are the family you choose. And some of us were blessed or fortunate to grow and grow up in wonderful families, right? But we don't necessarily get to choose our families, and we don't often get to choose our neighbors, but we can choose what we do and how we interact with those people. And I just come from the belief that if you want to be a good neighbor, and if you want to have good neighborhoods, if that is truly the desire of your heart, all you have to do is ask. Thank you.